We begin with tense moments on the south side of town where a man seen with an assault rifle caused an active shooter scare.
Yeah, police tell us no shots were actually fired, but we know the man with the gun was detained, at least briefly. Our Taylor Alaniz out live at the scene with what else we know about this top story. Taylor?
Yeah, Joe Mackenzie, police say this is just a simple misunderstanding. There was nothing to worry about. No one was arrested or shot. But what happened was a man who actually works at one of these businesses at the 5700 block of Staples had just bought a rifle. He was coming to the business where he worked to show, I guess, the employees his new rifle. But as you can see, there's tons of other businesses around and some people who didn't recognize him and just simply saw a man with a rifle, started freaking out, calling police, basically doing what police say people should do if they saw something strange. The man went upstairs. Police responded very quickly out here. There were about 6 or 7 police SUVs out here. Once they talked to him and figured out what was happening, they figured out he was just trying to show off his new rifle that he bought to some of the employees. He had no ill intentions whatsoever. He was not arrested. He was just talked to and told basically not to do that again. But again, it was just a simple misunderstanding. It was a false alarm. And people, acted vigilantly as they should. Police wanted to thank the public for calling in and want to encourage people to see, if they see something strange, call police and just continue that. But luckily, again, no one was hurt. This was just a false alarm. Joe Mackenzie.
All right, Taylor, so things work pretty much the way they should have in that situation. Thank you so much for the update live tonight.